Welcome to Diamond's Edge Live. Greg Diamond here, and on this week's show, let's talk about the selling that's been going on. A lot of volatility in the markets. Some people talking about recession, trade wars, inflation, the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of catalysts coming up. I think this is a very exciting time. I thrive in volatile environments. I like this type of price action. Okay, and this week what we're going to look at is the semiconductor sector and why I think this is key to how the market absorbs this selling pressure, okay, and what it means coming next. All right, so let me share my screen here. And what I want to start first, I'm going to start with the overall sector. Okay, we're going to look at the difference between the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, which is SOX, the SOX. All right, so what I want to show you here is this August low, August 2024 low. Okay, relative, you can see yesterday that this just bounced off that low. All right, now when I combine that with SMH, which is what I like to trade in 10 stock trader, there's a slight difference. So this is that August low. You can see that this hasn't made that August low. Now there's different reasons for that, mainly because of certain stocks that are in the semiconductor ETF, SMH, that are not in stocks, vice versa. But this is key, okay? We're getting into oversold conditions. We're getting into what I think has been a very long correction. And if 10 stock traders who are watching know, we've been tracking this since July of 2024, all right? Why we were tracking this, all right? Well, for the longest time, all right, and we can go back here, you know, we were trading from the long side in semiconductors, all right, all the way back from late 2022, 2023, okay? Now, when semiconductors made a high in July and could not make a new high with the S&P 500, with the NASDAQ Composite Index, with the Dow, with the banks, to me, that was a warning sign of divergence, negative price divergence, and that, hey, we're not going to have this huge move up, right? It's not going to be this everybody buy everything with both hands. Here we go. This is going to rally. This is technical divergence that was very important, all right, that warned me, hey, guys, I know everybody's on this bullish side right now, but this is telling me that we need to be careful, right? So what does that mean now? What it tells me now is that this monthly correction, multi-month correction from July of 2024 into March, maybe April, and I'll get into that in a second, and semiconductors is very close to being over. What does that mean? It means I'm expecting a low to take place and a rally to follow, okay? So if we take into account this move down, okay, I have this labeled as the A wave. And again, if you're just joining us for the first show of Diamond's Edge Live, if you go back to the first episode, I go over the 3 tenets of technical analysis, how I use this, Elliot wave, GAN, and the indicators. I'm going to cover all of those today. I'm going to cover them in every show. But if you're wondering what I'm talking about in terms of all these different technical terms, that's what I'm doing. I highly recommend going back and watching that show. All right, so on this big wave A, and then we had this nasty just, you know, sideways up to down, you know, false breakouts, false breakdowns, okay? And I have this B wave here up in the late part of January, and now we've seen this selling into March, all right? So this is something that I'm fooling with in terms of what to expect next, at least in the short term, and that will get us to the long term, okay? Well, what am I looking at here? What I have here is within this C wave, so this is where it gets important. A longer term correction, a big 3-wave move, A, B, C. So A wave down to August, B wave up into January, and then this C wave I have down into March, maybe April. All right. So when I scroll down here, what we're looking at, and I'll zoom in here on this C wave. Okay, at least what I believe is to be the ending in a C wave. All right. I have multiple counts here, but what I'm looking at here, you can see, you know, we had some CPI data that came out earlier this morning. It ticked down for the lowest, ticked lower than expectations. So we saw technology stocks rally on the back of that. You know, does this continue? What I told 10 stock trader subscribers, and there are a couple things that I'm looking at, okay? If this is a low, we might get a rally here into this black wave 4 here, okay? Maybe at the end of this week, all right? And then if that trades down into the end of March, next week you have the Federal Reserve meeting, obviously that's going to be important, okay? So if that creates another short-term high, let's say around this wave, this larger wave 4 here into black, okay, let's call it the 230 level on SMH, and we trade down into the end of the month in SMH, that likely marks a very significant low, all right? Now, what's the other scenario? This is where we have a scenario instead of the end of March marking a low, it actually makes, so let's say we have something like this, okay, and we actually rally into the end of March. The first week of April, President Trump has said that he's going to implement tariffs. Does that create another retaliatory response from Canada, from Europe, from Mexico, whoever it might be? All right, and this creates another temporary high. That's fine, okay? But within the rules of Elliott wave, this is where I'd be looking at a low into the end, probably called the third week of April. That creates the wave 5 low. Now, why also would that be important? Okay, what if we get something like this, that finally this A wave is broken, okay, just barely enough to where we start to rally? Where else would that be important? Let's go back to a longer term chart, okay? And what I want to show you here, and you can see how I've labeled this. So way back in August, I was looking at this. You can see, I'll zoom in on this so you can see it. I had this label as a possible wave 4 low. But since we didn't rally here, you can see, and I hadn't marked this in months, okay? You can see how I had this late August low, okay? But even if it's late March, excuse me, and then the third week of April, the point is that we need to buy weakness, okay? This is telling me that this huge move all the way from the lows in 2022 all the way up here, okay? Now this corrective move that we have is a wave 4 to a wave 5. Now, last week, I mentioned on the show, or if you've been a 10 Stock Trader subscriber, you've heard me say this before, that wave 4s are very tricky, okay? But the point here is, what's the risk to reward? The risk to reward is there isn't much left on the downside in this wave 4, let's call it over the next 6 to 7 weeks, okay? And so I'm starting to accumulate different call options. I'll also be trading different leverage ETFs. So I'm looking at this as an opportunity to buy. Now, wave 4s, again, are tricky. It doesn't mean you're just going to get this V-shaped bounce, okay? But for me, this longer, bigger term picture tells me that we're closer to the end rather than some, crash like some people might be expecting, okay? Again, doesn't mean it's going to feel volatile, right? You see these 5% moves down. We have a 3.5% move up in SMH. It's going to be volatile. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be big moves up and down. But that tells me that we're close, okay? So that's the overall bigger picture between in the sector itself. Now let me dive down into some specific stocks, all right? Here's one that I haven't traded in a long time, and this is Advanced Micro Devices, ticker AMD, all right? I want to start with this weekly chart, all right? And I'm showing you here from this low in November of 2023 into next week, okay, is 72 weeks. Now, I'm not going to get into why that's important. It's a Gann number, okay? Just know that there tends to be inflection points when that happens, all right? So this created a low and then a rally. If we drop into next week, or even the third week of March, whatever, it's around that time where we could see something similar, a low and into a rally. Well, what else do we have? Let me delete this right here, okay? And you can see here I have these two black arrows, all right? This low back in 2023 was around 94, 93, all right? If we break to that new low, what we'll likely see is you'll see stops get triggered, okay, and that would create the bottom for a reversal. That would also happen into an important time factor. That would also happen as AMD has traded all the way down from March 8th of 2024, into basically 1 year later, a little bit longer than a year, whatever, into a low. So a high from a low, around a year's time frame. To me, this has all the setups of a reversal. Now, AMD relative to some of the other stocks I'm going to cover, not as strong, okay? I'm not saying that AMD is going to trade back up to 225, but wouldn't you want to trade something from, let's call it 90, up to 145? I would. That's a huge move. Okay. So that's something in AMD that I'm looking at. If we zoom down into the short term, you can kind of see here, all right, I've gone all the way back on this daily chart and labeled, that low back in 2023. You can see we're getting close. All right. So, is this something where let's trace it out, and then we can use this relative to what we looked at with SMH. Do we get a pop and then a drop, and it looks something like that? Okay, that would be something that I would look to, whether it's end of this week or early next week or all of next week rather. Again, we'll see what the Federal Reserve does. If that creates that short-term high, whatever comes after that, the flush out, that's likely to be a buying opportunity. Okay, and then again, the worst case is that we see that more volatility into the first week of April around tariffs, and then we get to the end of April. Also, end of April. What is that? Earnings. All these earnings are coming out. So if we're creating this low into earnings, it's not often we get that. And it's happening into this larger correction. If you think about the ABC, the larger ABC of SMH, to me, I'm buying those earnings. I don't always do that. It's risky. But to me, the risk reward based on the Elliott wave movement of these stocks are telling me to own earnings. Okay. Again, that's if that happens. All right. So basically what we're looking at is the third or fourth week of March as a possible low. If we rally into that, it creates a lower high, and then we trade into April. Fine. I'm still accumulating shares. I mentioned to 10 stock trader subscribers yesterday, I'm looking at trading at like this tactically, okay, depending on how this happens. We've accumulated some call options, gave us plenty of time with longer dated expirations. So, we can trade that, what if scenario if the end of March actually ends up being a higher low or a lower high, excuse me. So I'll have more on that soon, but AMD on my radar. All right, now let's look at Nvidia. And you can see, Nvidia is in a much stronger position than AMD. But you can see here, all right, we had, this is pretty general, just trend line analysis and technical jargon. And we had a low yesterday. We bounced and rallied up. You can see here, I've labeled some of the dates. Okay, so if we have, again, if this rallies into early next week and then we create this low, Nvidia, the composite index and RSI aren't at extreme oversold levels, okay? But this all has the makings of a corrective move in a stock like Nvidia. All right. Let's also look at Micron, and this is something. This stock has been tricky. I haven't traded this in years actually, but it's something I've been watching. Okay, and you can see this one topped on June 20th. All right, and we've been in this long, sideways motion. Again, this tells me this is a corrective move. All right, a nice huge move today in Micron. All right, does this drop to just a slight new low similar to AMD? We get that slight new low, okay, and it could be volatile, right? Everyone gets scared. They get scared at the exact wrong time. We rally. Over the last couple of weeks, I've mentioned the CNN Fear and Greed Index that hit a low of 14. All right, but it's happening within a corrective pattern, especially when you look at that overall picture of SMH. All right, so Micron, this has been a choppy move, but this is something similar that I'm going to be watching relative to AMD, Nvidia, and then the overall sector. Same thing with Qualcomm, and we can look at Qualcomm again in a similar move to Micron, and this isn't something where it doesn't move like an AMD or an Nvidia that I like to trade anyway, but it's still useful to know. So to me, this has all the makings of I'll do the Elliott wave on this one so you can see. All right. To me, this has a 1, 2, 3. This is just one long big 4. And then we get the fifth wave down. We get the fifth wave down. What do we get? We get a reversal higher. Now, whether that trades to a no low, great. You can already see the RSI sloping up. The composite index is sloping up. We get that a lower low in price. We get a higher low on the indicators. To me, that's a buy signal. All right. Let's look at another big semiconductor, and that's Taiwan Semiconductors, TSM. And you can kind of see how I've labeled this already on here, right? Okay, from this high, which was January 2024, 2025, excuse me, we can see here, 1, 2, 3. If we get this rally into next week, all right, and that creates that lower high, and then we get that fifth wave down, again, whether it's late March, April, doesn't matter. I'm buying it. I'm buying it. You can already see, again, on this new price, composite index at the bottom, RSI at the bottom, they're starting to diverge, all right? So to me, that's very important. We can also look at Broadcom, and Broadcom actually has been in a stronger position. All right, they just reported decent earnings, but you know they weren't spared from the selling, and you know we had this gap that just filled last week. Okay, so now we're around. Look on this new price, we're seeing the same things. We're seeing this RSI and the composite index at the bottom start to diverge. Okay, again, let's say we get another drop. That's fine. To me, this is a buying opportunity on extreme fear and weakness. Last one is ASML. All right, and these guys are big as well. This has had a tough run of late too, but it's starting to bottom out. Okay, let's say it's similar to an AMD, and this one starts to move, and it breaks to that new low, creates that fear, creates that reversal. So within the semiconductors, that is what I'm looking at. Okay, and what I want to show you next is compared to, let's think about the bigger picture in terms of SMH making all these wave 4, that big wave 4 move. Okay, what I want to show you, and this is something that I highlighted to 10 stock trader subscribers yesterday on a daily chart. I want to show you the weekly chart, and this is the weekly chart of the iShares USA Momentum Factor Fund, ticker NTUM. Okay, so look what I came up with just yesterday. All right, and when you look at a longer term chart and you look at the RSI, yeah, usually I'm looking for a divergence. Usually I'm looking for positive reversals, but you also tend to see within bull markets, the RSI tends to find support around the 40 level. Okay, around the 40 level. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now you can see here, RSI got down to around the 40 level here yesterday. All right, look at, and then this is just simple trend line analysis. All right, from that low in 2023. See how this is channeling. So we have the channel up above that marks resistance. We have the channel, the trend line support on the bottom that marks support. Okay, connected beautifully and rallied right off of it. All right. Now here is, and these are hard to see because of the highlights. But this thick green line here is a 38.2% Fibonacci retracement. Now, 10 stock traders subscribers are saying, I know where Greg is going with this, and you should. The 38.2% Fibonacci retracement tends to mark the characteristic of a wave 4 low. So even though this doesn't look the same as SMH, okay, here I'll go back to SMH chart, right? It doesn't look the same, but it's telling me the same. It's telling me the same signals that this is a wave 4 and this is a wave 4. Okay, so again, you know, maybe maybe this momentum, you know, rallies up and then drops a little bit. You know, it's not. I'm not looking for perfection here. What is the risk to reward telling me? Does it favor something larger on the downside, or does it favor that this is just a healthy correction within the longer term bull market from 2022 that has more upside? To me, it's the latter. All right. Now let's look at the daily chart. Okay, and I'll zoom in here. And this is something that I highlighted to 10 stock trader subscribers yesterday as well. And this is just trying to figure out, okay, how does that larger wave 4 play out? Kind of like what we looked at with SMH. I'm doing the same thing with MTUM on the daily chart. Okay, so what I have here, and you can see we had this rally here, and I have these, you know, blue and red lines, but you can see what I'm looking at, right? It's very similar to what I'm looking at with SMH. If we get a high into the end of March, okay, that's in the red line here, you know, then okay, with tariffs coming the first week of April, then we get a low into earnings, I'm buying it. I'm buying it. All right, we can already see, much like all the other stocks that we've looked at today, okay, RSI is extreme oversold, and the composite index is also starting to slope up on these new price lows. Another thing that I highlighted is we often see, especially on these daily charts, the composite index on lows will make a series of 3 higher lows. So it would look something like this, where I'll scroll up so this is easier to see. So we would call this 1, 2. All right, maybe it rallies up a little bit more into next week. All right, and then drops, but then price makes a new low. With the composite index making that third higher low, that creates a setup for a low to trade. All right, and again, if we factor in Elliott wave, if we factor in earnings, this is weakness that I want to buy. The last chart is actually something that I find interesting, and I don't look at it all that often, but when I do, it tends to be very, very clear, and that's Canada. Now, Canada's been in the press a lot lately, the financial press anyway, well, a majority of press because of the tariffs, or the 51st state. I'm not going to get into that. I don't know if that's going to happen or whatever, but it's been important. All right. Now, at the end of last year, I highlighted this to 10 Stock Trader subscribers, looking at the top in January, in December. All right, this was a perfect 5-wave Elliott move from the low in August all the way up. You can see. All right, this is where we started buying some puts. Okay, and because of what it wasn't as clear in like the Dow or the Nasdaq. Okay, but this was very clear in Canada. Now, why Canada? I don't care why. It is clear, right? So I want to know, and obviously being very connected to the United States, we're going to see similar patterns. And when it's this clear, this is what I want to look at. All right. So after this 5-wave move up, you can see it's been quite volatile, but overall, it's just like I said, it's been a corrective move within this bull market. All right, and what we've seen here, and you can kind of see, RSI hasn't gotten to an extreme oversold level, but I have this box down here that I've been tracking. Okay, if we get more downside, okay, again over the next 3 to 4 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, 6 to 7 weeks in the earnings, this tells me if I see this support zone here in Canada, and this is the TSX, and if I combine that with everything else we've looked at, SMH, if we combine it with momentum that I just looked at, if we combine it with what's going to go on, it are likely to happen in AMD, okay, Qualcomm, Micron, all of them, they're all lining up to tell me that this is the inflection point for a low to trade. All right. So that's what I wanted to cover today in terms of semiconductors, in terms of how all of this wave 4 is coming together. Yeah, it's volatile. It swings in both directions. It can be tricky. Okay, we've looked at a couple of different time frames that we need to understand how a market trades into them. Okay, we've talked about being tactical. We've looked at how we're going to start accumulating these things. We've looked at the long-term charts, the long-term counts, along with some of the positive divergence that we're seeing across the board. So again, the evidence continues to pile up for me that we're looking at an inflection point to trade from the long side. That's where the risk reward is in terms of this leading semiconductor sector, and when we combine it with momentum and even an index like Canada, which has been in the news. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I wanted to give a little bit more time this week, given the volatility, in case you guys had any pertinent questions. Let's check it out here. Thank you for the analysis, Greg. How about Tesla? Yeah, how do you interpret what's going on with Tesla? That's a really good question, and Tesla's been hammered. People going after Elon, it's another story. But what we're looking at here is obviously, so you can see we had this low yesterday, we had this gap higher. I mean, look at RSI down there, right? So that made an extreme low, nearly at 20, but then look at the composite index relative. Okay, now Tesla is volatile for sure. Okay, you can see how it has these. Let me go to a weekly chart. Let me go to a weekly chart here. You can kind of see I was doing some stuff here. This was late last year. Okay, but basically what we have here is Tesla tends to have these series of huge moves up and huge move down. Okay, we saw it in 2020 up into 2020, 21, down into 2022, 2023, and now we're seeing it now. So, look at this weekly composite index here. Okay, just based on this is the most oversold it's been in a long, long time. Look, I mean, on this weekly composite index, all right, you go back to 2013, right? So, and this is an interesting, depending on how this week shakes out, this actually might be a trade to look at, okay? I'm not saying I'm going to trade it. I can't give any recommendations, okay? But this is a hammer bottom, okay? So if this candlestick chart, this candlestick pattern, if this holds, all right, and doesn't make a new low, and then if we combine it with everything else that we've looked at today, this could be a low, at least temporarily, in Tesla to trade. I'm trying to learn more about GAN. Which book would you recommend? I get that a lot. So GAN is very complex. There's a lot to try to understand. I'm still learning. Someone asked last week that, what would you do as a younger trader? You're always still learning. I'm always still trying to understand, more about the markets and certainly more about GAN. My advice is always get every book that you can and read it and then read it again. There's a ton of books that he's published. Some you'll find more useful than others. But I would try to get every single book that you can get. And again, most of them are relatively cheap on Amazon or whatever, but that would be my first advice. How do you see XYZ? I believed has bottomed for some swing up. How do you see XYZ? You mean the stock? Oh, block. Okay. So yeah, this is another one I haven't traded in a while either. Okay. So you see how this topped here in 2021 and 2022 and just never recovered with the rest of the market. To me, this is something that I usually stay away from. Now, there is going to be a correlation in terms of, if everything else bottoms, this is probably going to as well. But the likelihood that it gets back up to these highs is very, very small. Again, I'm not saying that you can't trade it. You can, and there'll probably be a correlation here. But let me go back to the daily chart. Yeah, so this is the problem here is with one of these stocks that has just been oversold for so long and just, again, it's had nice rallies, it's had nice moves, but really hasn't gone anywhere. If you look at, a 5-year chart, okay, it's just kind of consolidated and gone sideways to down. So, yeah, you can be nimble and pick it and try to trade it, but I'm not going to be trading this stock. Apple, oh, that's a good one. Let's look at Apple. So this is starting to correct into. So you can see I've labeled it here. All right, I'm glad someone brought this up. This is great. All right, this is nearly a perfect ABC correction. Okay. So what do I mean by ABC? So let me show you. This is a great textbook example of how we look at the overall. And I'll label this again here, 3, 4, 5. All right, so this is a big A, B, C, and then this entire thing, this might look a little tricky, hold on. So this is how I have Apple labeled right now. Just bear with me a sec. Essentially, this move from the high here, what was this back in, yeah, that was in December, okay, has corrected in a textbook ABC 535. What do I mean by 535? You can see here, there's 5 wave move down in the A, there's a 3 wave move down or up in a B that couldn't make a new high, and now we have 5-wave move down in C. Now, where does this 5-wave move down in the C wave end? Again, let's take into account what was happening at SMH, what's happening in momentum, what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Nvidia. All right, do we get another low and then a bounce here into next week, and then we get that final low into the end of March and or the end of earnings or into earnings? Yeah, great. This is probably something that is setting up for a low and a rally. Would it be correct to say that your composite index is like a stochastic momentum index? Yeah, it's another momentum indicator. Okay, it's just like RSI. I just like to use it as slightly different calculation. I like to use it because it gives me clues a little bit quicker than RSI does. But yeah, that's a fair point for sure. How about the SPY? Yeah, so I actually highlighted this to 10 Stock Trader subscribers this morning, and actually let me see here. I think I have it labeled up right here. So yeah, here it is. This is what I posted to 10 Stock Trader subscribers this morning. You can see here, I've just from this low in April, I've just connected some simple trend line analysis, and I've labeled also what has happened in the in terms of the short-term Elliott wave count, very similar to momentum. Very similar to momentum as well. Oversold in the RSI. Composite index is starting to slope up. Do we see that third high or low, depending on how this trades into the March-April timeframe? You can see here how I've labeled this, okay? 1, 2, do we pop up first and then, or is the third wave already complete as of yesterday? We get a 4 and a 5, or is there some variation of that? But that's what I'm looking at in the SPY. Very similar to momentum, very similar to SMH. What makes wave 4 so much trickier to figure out? That's a great one. And it's twofold. Number one is they come after the wave 3, right? So we have this just huge move that just rallies and rallies and rallies, right? Everyone's feeling good. And then we get a couple, 5% down days, whatever it might be, like Monday, okay? And then everyone starts to say, this is the end, the crash is here, okay? But what actually happens, especially in these wave 4s, is that it takes time to develop. And that the longer that time takes to develop without actually starting to recover, what does it do? It creates more fear. The flip side is, which also makes it tricky, is you'll see that wave 4, which leads to what? A wave 5, and that wave 5 actually tends to be a top. How long that wave 5 lasts is another tricky part. Okay, but again, this is where the risk reward for me comes into play, because I know that after that wave 4 is complete, you do get that huge move in a wave 5, which also catches people off guard. Okay, because they all thought the world was going to end. So wave 4s is really an emotional reaction after a huge run up that makes it tricky in terms of when it's going to end. Do you have tips for balancing the craziness of day trading with trying to have a family life? I don't really day trade that much anymore. I still trade futures personally, but what I'm mostly focused on every single day is exactly what I'm showing you now. Yeah, I look at much shorter term charts. If you watched the first episode, I kind of go over like what it is to day trade, looking at a 1 minute, 1 day chart. But that's the life you choose. That's the life I've chosen. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Trading isn't a job. It's not a career. It's a lifestyle. You have to want to be able to, and I like it because it's a problem. It's a problem solving skill constantly. You're trying to put all these different pieces together. What's happening with Trump, what's happening with Canada, what's happening with inflation, what's happening with the Fed, what's happening with earnings. And then I take all that into account with my technical strategy. And so it's, it makes you feel alive. So, and then the balance with family, I have to balance my family or balance it with family. But it's nice because whether it's, cooking or just hanging out with my kids, it takes me away and it gives me a little bit of a break from the constant, thinking and thought process and what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next. But luckily I'm also, my wife is understanding of what my job is, what my career is, what my responsibilities are to my subscribers. So she's on board with it, and luckily she is. Oh, do I have any tips? My tips is that you have to set a boundary. So I would say, whatever, like for me, I have to exercise in the morning. So that's my getaway. Okay, whether it's even just 30 minutes taking my dog for a walk, or an hour, at 4:30. I usually wake up around 4:30, and that's when I have to have, my just focus on me for a little bit. But anything that you like to do, whether it's, reading a book that's not finance or something to take you out of that element. Otherwise you'll burn out. And burnout happens, it's natural. But, when you start to feel yourself get to that, that's when you have to take a break for yourself. Was there a big trade in your past that you wish you could have had a do-over on? Yeah, I think I always say don't be the head trader of hindsight capital, meaning you can always go back and say, oh, I wish I could have, wish I would have, uh, caught the flash crash in 2010 or 2011 or whatever it was. There are plenty of trades where, I can have a do-over on, but I don't like to focus on that. I always like to focus. Yeah, you're going to miss trades. You can miss every single day the market's open. You're going to miss some type of trade. It happens. But I don't like to get caught up in that, because that's a negative energy loop. Like, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. And 10 Stock Trader subscribers probably get tired of me saying it, but it's the truth. And you always have to focus on what's next. If you're always focused on what's already happened that you can't do anything about, it's a waste of energy. It's a complete waste of energy. But I would say probably the biggest trade that I wish I would have gotten back was probably being net short bonds from 2021 all the way down. Now I mostly traded stocks in 2022, and we got that right. But looking back on it, obviously with interest rates doing what they did, that would have been a home run for sure. Nice putting, Matt. How's your golf game? My golf game, it sucks. I don't get to play golf really anymore. Just with work and kids. That's for my son. He's starting to get into it. So I had more toys here, but I removed them. But yeah, I really don't get to play golf anymore. So it's unfortunate, but that's just part of getting older with two kids and having more responsibilities at work. So. It looks like that's it. Thank you very much. Also, there's also one other thing. If you are interested, I have an important video that's coming out. You can check out. That tonight, I believe. Just visit that website. Thank you, guys. Next week. But you can check out the website tonight.